Well, hi everyone. Welcome to Biblical Greek. I'm your instructor, Peter Brown, and we're going to take a look now at the alphabet. Now, if you prefer, you can simply follow along in the book and listen to this in audio, so whatever's convenient for you. I figured this might be helpful as well as another way we could learn this. Well, let's just jump right in here without further ado and take a look at the letters. And we see here that there's a capital letter and then a lowercase letter, just like in English. The capital letters in Greek, we will see, just like in English, for words that begin a sentence and also for proper names. Okay, we generally won't see them other times. However, in ancient manuscripts, they wrote almost exclusively in capital letters. And one of the reasons for that is that the writing instruments they had at the time, it was much easier to write capital letters than it was lowercase letters. So when we actually will look at an ancient manuscript in the second semester, we'll see that it will be written exclusively in capital letters. So do pay attention to the capital letters. They're important, although you're going to see the lowercase letters a lot more. All right, but this is simply the letter alpha, all right, and it sounds like the English letter A, but when the A has an sound. All right, this is usually a short vowel, although once in a while in certain words it will be treated as long. Okay, we'll talk about that later. All right, this is the the Greek letter beta. It looks like a B and it sounds like the English letter B. All right, that one's pretty straightforward. All right, this is also the very common letter gamma, okay, which sounds like the hard G in English, but never like the soft G. So it always has a G sound to it, as in game or gamesmanship or gang, but never a J sound. All right. This is the letter delta. The lowercase d here looks quite like the lowercase English d, although it's a little bit more squiggly in the top. And it has a D sound to it. All right. This is the Greek letter epsilon. Epsilon. Okay. It is a short vowel, also always short, and it looks and sounds like the English E, but when the E is soft, like an sound. All right. That one's pretty straightforward as well. Okay, now we have the letter zeta. Okay, the capital zeta looks exactly like the English Z and indeed sounds like the English Z. The lowercase zeta is a little hard to recognize. It's got that little squiggly line in the top and kind of looks like a C with a squiggly line in the top and a tail on it. All right, so you'll just have to get used to looking at that one, but that's what that letter is. And it has the same sound as the English Z, or sometimes with the sound that you would get if you put the letter D and Z together, like Z. All right. Now, this is the letter eta, very common long vowel. Okay, it's not the letter H. This is confusing, but you just have to get used to that. The capital eta looks like the letter H. The lowercase eta looks like an H with the head cut off of it. Okay, but it is a vowel and it has an A sound to it. A. All right. Okay, this, if you've ever had calculus or trigonometry, it's always the angle variable symbol. It's the letter theta. Okay, and it's simply a circle with a line through it, and it has a TH sound. Okay, that in Greek is accomplished. Sound is accomplished with the use of one letter, the theta. Okay, now we come to the iota or the iota. Okay, it looks like the English I, and it has an I sound to it, an E sound to it. All right. Normally it's short, although once in a while, in a few select words, it will be long. All right. Moving on along, this is the letter kappa. Looks and sounds just like the English letter K. All right, nothing really particularly confusing or difficult about that one. All right, this is the letter lambda. Lambda. All right, a common word, symbol in fraternities, particularly the capital one, but the lowercase one you see quite a bit. There's many words that use this letter. It's a common letter. and it sounds like the English L. L. All right. Now we come to the letter mu or mu, however you prefer to say it, and it simply sounds like an M. And you notice the lowercase 1 also sort of looks like an M with a tail on it and the center of it collapsed. Okay, so that one's not too hard to remember either, unlike the lambda, which you just have to get used to. All right, now this is a little bit hard to remember at first, the nu. The nu, capital Nu, looks exactly like an N. Okay, however, the lowercase nu is a little bit confusing. It looks kind of like the English letter V, but it's not. It's the letter nu, and it has an N sound to it. It's very easy to pronounce, but it's a little bit hard to recognize at first. And how did this happen? We have our letters backwards. The Kasai here should be next before the Omicron. Oh well, doesn't matter so much. You'll learn the alphabet soon enough, but the Kasai comes before the Omicron. Okay, but the Kasai here is basically just the closest equivalent in English is the English letter X. Okay, now frequently, for phonological reasons, you'll get into that whenever the language wants to soften the K here with something smoother, that's more mellifluous, it'll use the Kasai. But it has basically the sound of the English letter X. It's not quite the same as the letter X, but it's pretty darn close. Okay, so that's Kasai or Kasi. Now we have the letter Omicron. Omicron, which is always it looks like the letter O, and it has an ah sound to it. Ah. Okay, it's always a short vowel. Omicron. Okay, now we arrive at the letter pi, or what a purist would call P, and it has, predictably enough, the sound of the letter P. P. As in pathos. It looks, of course, just the same as the symbol used in geometry. So that one should be pretty familiar to you if you've ever had any high school mathematics. All right, good enough. Here's the letter. That's a little bit tricky because it looks like a P, the English letter P, in both the capital and the lowercase, but it's not. It's the letter Rho, Rho, R-H-O, and it has a R sound to it. And when it begins a word, as we're going to see in a moment, it has more of a kind of a guttural sound to it, like that, almost like saying the R from the back of your throat. All right, that's the Rho. Don't confuse that with the P, okay? With the P sound. It's an R sound. All right. Okay, here we've come now to the letter sigma. Notice there are three versions of this. There's the capital version, which is fairly uncommon, but you will see from time to time, and we'll see if you've ever had statistics. It's the symbol for sum. Then there's the lowercase version, which you'll see any place in the word except the end, in which case you see the final sigma. Okay, in every case, the letter just sounds like the English S. Okay, but when the S ends the word, you'll see the final or terminal sigma, which is here. Okay, so it's sigma. All right, the letter tau. The letter tau looks like a T and basically sounds like the English T. Okay, that one's pretty straightforward, I think. All right, the letter upsilon. Upsilon. It is a vowel. Okay, generally speaking, it's a short vowel, but it can be long in certain words. Okay, it has an sound to it. It's sort of like the English U in the word umbrella. Umbrella. Notice the capital upsilon looks like a Y, okay, but it's not a Y sounding, it's an sounding. Okay, so one of the things that happens is, we'll see this sometimes if you ever go to church, you'll see Kyrie, Kyrie eleison, okay, but of course it's not pronounced Kyrie, it's pronounced Kyrie eleison, okay, and that's because the reason the Kyrie came about is because it's a capital letter someone wrote it in capital letters originally and thought that the Y should be pronounced like an English Y, but of course it's not really a Y, it's an upsilon. Okay, but so keep that in mind. You'll see that very frequently in words that are loaned from Greek that when they have an upsilon in them, they'll come into the English language with a Y sound, because the upsilon looks like our letter Y, but it's sort of an accident how that happened. All right, now we've come to the letter phi, or sometimes pronounced phi, and it simply is like the pronunciation of the English letter F. All right, or the PH sound that you would see in the word telephone, or phonics, or phobia. All right, that one you just simply have to learn from the appearance of it. It's a circle. All right, sorry about that. We're just about done here, though. We just finished the letter phi, and now we will move on to the letter chi, or sometimes pronounced ki. Okay, the letter chi, the letter ki, is basically like the same sound as kappa here, except that the letter ki has a little bit more of a guttural sound to it. So, for instance, the word Christos, the word for Christ, has, you notice I kind of said a ch, Christos, like that. It has sort of a rough, guttural beginning to it, much in the same way the word for the famous composer Bach is pronounced in German. The ch there at the end. All right, it's more of a guttural sound. Okay, but it basically has the same sound as the kappa, except more guttural. All right, now we move on to the second to last letter, and this is the letter psi, or psi, however you prefer to say it, and it has the PS sound to it, with the P kind of virtually quiescent, like the word psychiatrist, or psychotropic medicine, or something like that. All right, so it's the letter psi, and it's basically like a U with a line through it. All right, finally, we come from alpha to omega, as our Lord told us we would, and this is the last letter in the alphabet, and it has the sound of an English O, a long O, like in Obama. All right, it is the capital letter looks like the upside down horseshoe, and the lowercase looks like a W, but it's not. It's the long omega, always a long vowel. Okay, well, let's move on to take a look a little bit at pronunciation. Okay, let's take a look at a couple special cases for pronunciation that we're going to run across. Let's put our machine in Greek. All right, let's do it without the accent here. There we go. Okay, this is the word for angel, and it's pronounced angelos, angelos. Notice when you have the two gammas put together, it doesn't sound like a g, it sounds like an ng, okay, ng, like the sound that you'd get from putting the English ng together. Angelos, angelos. Okay, and you're going to see the same thing when you see the gamma fall before a kappa, or the gamma fall before a chi. Okay, it's going to have an ing sound to it. All right, that's just a little quirk that you run into with that particular letter combination. Okay, but that's how you get the sound, the angel sound without an N in the original Greek. Okay, that is a Greek word. All right, now the second thing you have to pay attention to is rough and smooth breathing marks. Okay, what are breathing marks? Well, anytime you have a word that begins with a vowel, okay, take this word, okay, ace or haste. We don't know which, so we really need to have a breathing mark here to tell us which one it is. Okay, so it could be like that. It could be ace, or there we go. It could also be like this. Notice on the first one up here, we have what looks like an apostrophe, ace. All right, whereas the second one here, we have what looks like a backwards apostrophe. That's pronounced hace. All right, and they're actually two different words. Okay, ace with the smooth breathing mark. All right, this is a smooth. Okay, this is the word for into. All right, that's what the word means, or in. All right, it's pronounced ace. This, however, has a rough breathing mark. Hace, hace. Okay, almost like the letter H here, except there really is no letter for H in Greek. If you want to have a H sound like that, you put a rough breathing mark at the beginning of a word over the initial vowel. Okay, so this has a rough breathing mark. And soon, one of these days, I'll learn how to spell. But this is the letter for the number 1. Okay? Notice there are two different words here depending on whether it's a rough or smooth breathing mark. So any Greek word that begins with a vowel, okay, or in this case a diphthong, that's a cluster of vowels, needs to have a breathing mark over it, either a smooth breathing mark or a rough breathing mark. Going back to the word angelos here, notice that we have a smooth breathing mark because it's angelos. Okay, it's not hangelos, okay, as it would be if you had a rough breathing mark over it. All right, so keep that in mind, and also keep in mind that you also have words that begin with rho, and when they do, let's go back into Greek here. Oops. There we go. Okay. Notice that I put the rough breathing mark over the initial rho. Okay, you always have to do that whenever a word begins with rho. And so the word is actually pronounced chrema, chrema. Okay, and this actually is the Greek word for word. All right, but it has to have a rough breathing mark over it. Any word that begins with a rho has to have a rough breathing mark over it. Okay, that's just a particular little idiosyncrasy in the language. Okay, now you'll learn how to make all these smooth breathing marks and rough breathing marks as you go through this week here and follow the keyboard macro that you're going to download. It's not difficult to get the feel of once you do a bunch of them. Okay, so these are the rough and smooth breathing mark. Now you also have accents, okay? And there are 3 different kinds of accents, okay? There's the acute accent, which is, let's pick a word here. Okay. Christos. Christos. Okay. Notice we have an accent over this particular syllable. All right. That lets us know to accent that particular syllable when we're pronouncing the word. Christos. All right. That's what's called an acute accent. Now you have another version of the acute accent, which is kind of a special case, and it's called the grave accent. All right. So you have particularly like a word like tone, which is the accusative singular of the word the. Don't worry about that now. But when you have a single syllable word, a monosyllabic word like this, or a word that's accented in the last syllable, okay, you will always see it with a grave accent over it, which is sort of a backwards acute accent rather than an acute accent. I'm not exactly sure why that is, but it's just a custom in accentuation of the word. Now, the only exception to that is if the word happens to end a sentence. Okay? So again, don't get too hung up on this now, but just notice when you start to read through sentences and putting several words together, you're going to notice some of them are accented this way and some of them are accented this way. Notice the only time you ever get this accent, which is the grave accent, is when you're accenting a single syllable word or a word that's accented on the last syllable that doesn't end the sentence. Okay? And that's the only time you'll ever see that. Okay? Otherwise, you're going to see this accent here, or there's one other possibility, and that's called the circumflex. Okay? The circumflex will be like this. And we'll give an example here from a word that we're going to learn soon, the word for hour. Okay? See if we can do it. There we go. Without the breathing mark here. Now, orda. Okay, now here's the problem with this. We really should have a breathing mark with it as well. Because remember, I told you if it starts with a vowel, it's got to have a breathing mark. Okay, so let's put one. Okay, let's take a look here. Okay, notice it's got a rough breathing mark here, but don't worry about the breathing mark. Look at the little squiggly line over the breathing mark there. That's a circumflex accent. Okay, a circumflex accent kind of has a rolling sound, like horai. And this happens to be the Greek word for hours. Okay, hours, the plural. Okay, let's look at another word that we could see and would. The word for spirit. Okay, pneuma. All right, pneuma. This is the word for spirit, and it has, this particular word happens to have a circumflex. Okay, which words have a circumflex and which don't? You'll just kind of learn with the vocabulary. It's not that big a deal, though. Okay, in general, for most words, it makes very little difference whether you put a circumflex. In most cases, it's not even something I would get right 100% of the time. Okay. But just be aware that these are the possible accents that you could see. The circumflex has kind of a more rolling sound to it than the acute or the grave accent does. It's more like pneuma. Okay, but other than that, it doesn't mean anything significantly different than what you would see in the terms of the pronunciation from the much more common acute accent. Okay, now there are a couple exceptions of where accents do matter. Sometimes accents can make a difference between a word. So, for instance, take the word meno. Okay, meno. Meno means I remain, or I am remaining. It's present tense. However, when I shift the accent to the final syllable to get menoo, okay, that means I will remain. All right. So accents do make a difference, particularly with certain kinds of verbs. Okay, and sometimes there are even nouns that are differentiated by accents. But in most cases, accents, don't make a tremendous amount of difference. Okay. There are some professors that are real sticklers for accents. I'm not one of them. Okay, I don't want you to get really terribly bogged down with accents. You will pick up the rules of accentuation and how we accent words next. All right, but right now let's just learn the three kinds of accents that you see, and those are the acute accent, okay, the grave accent, and the circumflex accent. Okay, and notice here in this particular case, there's the circumflex accent coupled with a breathing mark, which is, of course, you're going to see if you happen to find a word accented that way on the first syllable, which is a vowel. Okay. All right. So let's continue here and look briefly at punctuation marks, and then we will stop. Okay. The first punctuation mark, which we will see most commonly, is the period. Let's put it up here so you can kind of get a sense of where we go. All right. That's the period. Okay, that simply ends a sentence, just like the English period would. All right. Now, we also see the semicolon here. The semicolon is like the English question mark, okay? It marks a question in Greek. So when you want to end the sentence with a question mark, you put what looks to be a semicolon there. Okay? Now, let's take a look here. There's one other kind of mark you will see, and that is, let's see if I can do it here. I don't think you can do it on this. I'm trying to remember. Someone actually showed me last year that you can do it. It's not a big deal, but you'll see them in the text. Okay, I don't really care whether you can type them or not, but basically it's equivalent of a comma. Okay, but what it will be is a period, but sort of sitting in the middle of the line. Okay, so sort of halfway up the line. Okay, if you can figure out how to do it, let me know. I think there's a way you can do it on this on this macro, but I'm not 100% sure. But again, it's not that big a deal whether you can do it or not. But just be aware of it when we're reading text. You will see this comma-like looking thing, this period-looking thing, which is sort of halfway up the letter, and that has the equivalent of a comma. It sort of marks a pause in a phrase, but not the beginning of a new phrase. Okay? All right, very good. Well, thank you very much for sitting through the first lesson here, and I look forward to seeing you in the second lesson. All right, have a good day.